So welcome to another channel of my YouTube episodes, and this one here I'm going to feature all of our edits in a new application online called Photopea. In the past we've used Pixlr and it's worked quite well. It's really good. I've got other tutorials that you can follow doing the same assignment in Pixlr, but I feel like Photopea is a much better application, and I'm going to focus using these new tools. And if you follow me in the IM assignment, you'll be able to complete this from start to finish. So I'd like to show you some examples and just take you through the process of how to cut hair out, cut out a body, use layer masks, save it out, and apply a shadow, a few things like that. So let me take you through it. I've got examples to share here, and they're on my screen. And here's an original photo of Machu Picchu in Peru. And I thought, how cool would it be to put yourself in there as giants? So here we are in a different photo. So what the idea is that you cut yourself out and then you photo impose yourself into the background to create this effect right here. So I've got extra little clouds in there, and I can even share with you those tips and tricks as we go along. I've got a student who did this last year, and it was a Venom poster, and I just thought this turned out quite nice. So his face was replaced with the other half of the face from the original movie poster. So do me a favor and go check out the original and see the differences. And I've got one more idea here that I'm developing. This one wasn't quite finished, but you can see I can use the same image of the two of us sitting in the mountains, but instead of in the mountains here, we're kind of in a valley. So just ideas on the fly. Now back to the IM assignment. So the idea is that you would photograph a picture of yourself, make sure you match the lighting in order to just fit into that background. It's very important that the lighting matches. So here I was lucky because when I took these photos, I didn't have this in mind. I came up with the idea later, and the lighting is coming from I'll say in the corner over here, but it's our rear to my right facing this computer. So that's the same lighting as I've got in the Machu Picchu picture. The lighting is coming from the top right hand corner. So it works out. I had to cut out ourselves. So I did this ahead of time. It's all cut out, but there's certain ways that I prefer cutting images. So I'm going to demo this right away. And how you would open an image is going File, Open, and Open will just open a separate tab, separate image. So I'll just demo that. I'll go open up one of my links, and I've got, here's my original photo. I'll open it again. So it'll take a moment to load. In fact, I've got it open twice now, and I'll close my other one. So here, if I were to approach this, okay, if it comes in sideways, you can rotate the image. So you go Image, Transform, Rotate 90. So if it's at a crooked display like that, I can just easily edit and then just go to Image, Transform. I can rotate it back now, so rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, and I'm back in action. The next thing that I would do here is I always check my image size. So I go Image, Image Size, and it always will ask you for pixels. So change the pixel value to inches, and that image is huge. It's 56 inches wide by 42 inches high. I would like my poster to be only 8.5 by 11. So I'll play around with values here. I'll do 11 inches wide, and I'll play with the dots per inch. In class, I've been saying let's stick to 150, because that's what most printers will produce anyways, most digital printers. 300 would be the max. So that would be your highest end photo. So if you want to do 300, go for it. But just understand that if you use images from the web, it'll restrict you a lot as in terms of quality. So 150, I got 8.25 by 11. I'll hit OK. So now my image is going to shrink in size. I can zoom in by going Control plus. And now, in order to cut out the background, I like to use the lasso tool. It's quick and dirty. And I'll just do a quick outline of us. And notice that I'm not focusing on details at the moment. And I'll go around the edge like this. Release. I get my marching ants, and I can hit backspace on my keyboard. It's Control D to get rid of the marching ants. I'll zoom in even closer. And because I've had questions about how to cut out hair, I'm going to demo this at the moment. So I won't focus on the entire body, but I will focus on the hair here to help you guys out. So I've got a lot of detail to take out. I could do it by hand with my lasso tool, and right now I'm using a mouse, and I do have a tablet here that I can use, which is very helpful, but I'm going to pretend like you don't have a tablet. And how would you do this on a Chromebook? So I could do it like that, and I'm just manually dragging with my lasso tool. I'm doing little chunks, and I'm trying to capture pieces of the hair, and I'm going around because it's all going to be individual strands. Okay, so I can do that. That could be quite tedious. I've got another technique that I prefer much better. I mean, the eraser could work too, because then you can just click and drag. You can adjust your eraser, the size of it, and then I could go in and kind of carefully select around the hair and just leave little strands in there. Again, this stuff takes patience, takes time, but you can already see I've trimmed out around some of the hair above here. Another trick I really like doing is I like to add a background color, like a bright color, so that way I'm not left with any bit of white or halo. So I just drag my new layer, and I'll slow myself down. The new layer icon is at bottom right next to the garbage can. I use that often. So I click there, it makes a new layer. I'm going to call this BG for background. And I always try and name my layers. So here is, I'll just call it us because it was my wife and I. So BG, I'll go to my paint bucket tool, make sure I pick out a bright color. So, I mean, green would work. It'd be kind of like faking a green screen. So now I've got green in the background, and I use the paint bucket tool to fill that area. So if I zoom out, you'll see what happened. I'll zoom back in, and I'm going to solely focus on the hair here. And then I'll jump into the other assignment. We'll skip a few steps, but I'll ask that you take your time with your own photo. So the next option is to use a layer mask. And the layer masks are really helpful. And I'll zoom into this icon here, but it's right here. It's like a little rectangle with a circle, and it's next to the folder icon in Photopea. So if you select the right layer, so right now I need it to be on the us layer, and I add, close that, I add that layer mask. It adds an extra little rectangle next to the icon that you see in your layers panel. So anyways, I need to click on, I'll zoom into it. I need to click on that layer style, okay? And here, this is where I'm going to use a brush. And the brush needs to be black in order for this to work. So I use a brush. You can adjust the size of your brush. You can adjust how soft or hard the brush is. But it has to be black and white, and I'll show you in a moment what that affects. So I've got black and white loaded in my color swatches, And now, because I've got those little dotted lines in that layer, in this layer mask, it will allow me to use it like an eraser. And what I prefer doing is adding a very soft edge. So I usually go about 80, high 80s, low 90% in my brush. So that way it creates a slightly feathered soft edge. So I'm using my mouse again to get rid of stuff. But if I go in too deep, like if I cut off part of her face or hair, I can just swap the colors from black to white, and I can just bring that information back. That's the beauty of a layer mask. So that's really important. Now, if ever you're masking stuff out, use this technique. This is the professional way to go about it. I mean, the eraser is quick, it works, but in my opinion, this is the best way to do it, because then you never lose your work. You never have to undo. All you got to do is swap from black to white, and you're always it's lossless, right? You don't lose that information. So I'll zoom in, try to do a decent job here. And again, I'll just use my mouse because I know that's what most of you are using, or a trackpad. And another thing too, make sure that you're always working in the layer mask. If you are working in the photo itself, watch, you'll be painting white. If that happens, then undo, Control Z, and click on the layer mask. You'll get those little white dots surrounding it, and we're back in action. If I gotta go back to my black, and again, it's about detail. You can cut some of the detail out. You be the judge of that. So let's say I wanted little strands here to go in. Well, then I would reduce my brush size. And there's shortcuts on your keyboard. Next to your P key, there's brackets. So those brackets will allow you to expand and decrease the size, the diameter of your brush. So I'm just manually going in here, and I'll make my brush even smaller. And it might look real choppy when I'm zoomed in like this, but as you zoom out, you'll see it'll create like those hair effects and the little strands. And you can do as much or as little as you want here. And sometimes, like, I'm at the very smallest brush at 1 pixel right now, and I'm zoomed in. I know in Photoshop it'll tell you like the percentage that you're zoomed in your tabs here, but I don't see it here at the moment. So I'm just going around. I'll make my brush bigger. I'm using the brackets to do this. And again, I'm just going to focus on the hair at the moment. And I'm freehanding most of this right now. I don't like how this looks, so I'll just kind of click and drag with a bit of a swoop. Remember, hair is never perfectly straight, so feel free to cut some of it out. Give your person a haircut if you want, a little trim. Another trick I've used in the past is if you want an extra strand of hair, you can use your eyedropper tool. Select a color. Here I'll use a dark brown. I'll use a brush. I'll make another new layer and make my brush smaller. I'll call that one hair. I'll make a hair layer, and I can add little strands of hair or little, I wouldn't do too much, don't go crazy with this, but you can add like little effects like that. So there her hair is really dark and here it's really light. So I'll use my eyedropper tool. I'll select some of that blonde hair, use my brush, and it's a 1 pixel brush right now. And I can add like my own little strands too. So you can do two ways. You can cut around them or you can add your own. So like that one's too much, but little pieces here and there, I don't like that. Just zoom out. If I zoom out now, because that's really what you're gonna see, if I take away the green, that's a pretty good job. So I would save this. You can save this once you're done cutting everything out. If you want to share it with someone, you save it as a PNG. So it keeps your transparent background. But in this case, I'm just going to transfer it into another one of my tabs. So I've got this done, let's say. I can often, actually, you should often save as a PSD. So if you do that, it'll automatically save into your downloads folder and it'll keep the name that you have. So my image was called IMG0924. So if I want to change that, I double click on my tab, change this to, I'll put us cut out. You can use anything you want as long as you understand what it is. And then if you, when next time you go to save it, that's the name it'll preserve. So okay, there's a nice easy way to do this. So here, because I want to bring in the extra layer of hair with this, I'll click on the hair layer, hold shift and click on the us layer, and I can click and drag those two layers into my next tab. So that tab, actually I got to check which one it is. So I got a bunch of them. So is this one, IMG 1297. So if I go to us cut out, I select these two layers by holding shift. So click on it, they turn dark gray, hold shift, click on the next one, and then click and drag those to IMG 1297 and release. And there we are. That's what I had cut out, and we're quite small. And the reason we're quite small is because this original image is huge again. So if I take that, I can delete these two layers actually. Delete those ones. And I want to adjust this image size. So image size, again, it's 56 inches wide. So I'm going to make this 11 inches wide. And I'll match the DPI, which is dots per inch, 150. And click OK. There we go. Now you'll see when I go to bring us in, I'll drag that in again. We're almost the same size as the first example that I showed you. So the difference between this one and this example is I took the time to cut everything out. So I'm going to just work from here at this point. And you can see I've got my layer masks in these layers, and I even added two of us here. So I got two of us layers. And the reason I did that was to brighten it up. But the best way to brighten up an image or change the colors is to go under Image, Adjustments, and you could play with all of these settings here. But one of my favorites is Hue and Saturation and Curves. Those are the two options that I use the most. So Hue and Saturation. The hue, what it will do is it'll change everything. It'll change all the master colors. So you could make yourself look real sick here, especially if you look green. I don't generally play with that unless I need to make the image look like orangey. Then I can play with those colors ever so slightly and use the saturation to either pump up the values of those colors or desaturate, take away the color. So if you want it to be black and white, you would take your saturation and bring it to 0. I'm going to adjust that to original. If I take my saturation, I go all the way to the left here, we're black and white right now. So, and then lightness, you can adjust how much contrast, how light or dark the image is. So if your image had like a reddish background, this is where you can adjust your hue to kind of match the reddish tones, play with the saturation, and then this is your solution to matching the colors. So I'll take a moment here, see if I can match it. We are quite bright here, and if ever you're not happy, just go back to 0 and it'll reset to where it was, where you started. So I'm actually quite happy with the way it looks, so I'm not going to mess around with that. You can even click colorize and it'll give it a sepia tone look. I'm sure there's other options that you can play with, but these are things that you can learn and grow with as you go. I've got clouds in here as well, and it's not hard to do. It's just an PNG image that I got on Google Images of a cloud. So if I were to save this, I'll show you an example. I'll put clouds PNG in Google Images, and you can save PNG images and import them. So if I like this cloud, let's say, or these ones that are floating, they look like they got a black background here, but in fact, if it's a true PNG, it will come in with a transparent background. So actually I like this one better. And you can see those little gray squares, that means it's transparent. So I right click on it, save the image as. I will save it to my downloads. It's called Cloud PNG 7. Save, and I'll demo this. So then if I want to open that in this document, what I like to do is go File, Open and Place. So what that will do is open it and place it into your image. I'll go into Downloads, find that image with my mess of, oh, here it is, Cloud PNG 7. Open. There it is. If I'm using my Move tool, notice these are nice clouds here. They're quite large. If I want to make these smaller, I go Edit, Free Transform, hold Shift. And the reason I'm holding Shift is to keep it proportionate. If you don't hold Shift, you can squish it, skew it. It changes the form of it. But yeah, at this point, you can be creative. You could have it going over our shoulders. You could bring it behind us. So let's say I wanted it here, but it had to be behind my body. Well then, all I got to do is drag Cloud PNG 7 behind our layers. So what that will do is it will be visible behind us. So now those clouds could be behind our heads. And actually that's kind of a cool spot there. So if I like that, I've got a really nice cloud effect that will make it look more visible. And in terms of shadows, we need to look at our lighting and identify where's our shadows. So we've got a harsh shadow casting on the left-hand side of this mountain. And so in order to do that, what I've done in the past is you can control click on any one of these little thumbnails. So if I control click on one of our layers, it will highlight the outside edges which I've cut out. So that's a way to get a quick selection. You can make a new layer and fill it in with black. So I'll demo this and use my paint bucket tool. Make sure you're on a new layer. This one's called layer 3. I'll call it shadow example. And I will click in there. Actually, it'll be pink. So I gotta change that to black. So I'll double click on my colors panel, select black, and I'll just click in there again while the area is selected. Hit Control D, and I've got this shadow layer. It's sitting above us, so that's why we look like a silhouette. I'll toss that underneath our own layer. And see this? It's floating. It's a separate layer. So I can play around with that. In fact, if I want to skew this, I can go to Edit, Transform, and I can flip it, I can rotate it, I can warp it, or perspective. So perspective is what I want to use. And here I'll zoom out, Control minus. And I'm not crazy about this tool. I much prefer how Photoshop handles it, but you can see how it'll skew it either way here. So I'll try to do a, and remember, we're working on an online software, open source, so it's excellent, but it will be a little bit laggy. So I can play around and see this. I can make the shadows go behind us. In fact, it's not the right direction. So I would need to make those shadows extend in a different way. So this is where you got to take some time with it. I might even just rotate like this. And it's being a bit laggy with me at the moment. So let's say I was happy with that. I can definitely spend more time making it better. But that shadow would be skewed, casted away from us, and the shadow of Linda here would be casted on those mountains behind us, and mine would be casted on the front face of that mountain. So it's not terrible. And at this point, I can play with the opacity, turn down the opacity. I usually go about 50–60%. And this is okay, but it still looks pretty fake. So my trick to making it look better is I add a blur filter. So I go to filter, blur, and I use Gaussian blur. And what that does is it'll blur out everything. If you do too much, it won't be recognizable at all. But sometimes shadows won't be recognizable the further they are away from the subject. So that mountain is a ways away. So our shapes wouldn't be that identifiable anyways. So I can get away with a big blur effect here. And all it's doing is it's just casting a darker shadow area on those mountains. And so it will give it the illusion like we were there and we were blocking some of that sunlight. So this is a bit much. And again, it's a bit laggy because we're online. I'm happy with 73. You can see it's a bit darker there in the mountains. Click OK. And I can adjust how bright, how dark it is by playing with the opacity. And I can do some fine tuning here. I'm actually quite happy with the way that looks. So I would call this pretty well done here. I mean, I can play around with different things. There's another trick that I like to do. I click on our layer. So if you're using a layer mask, make sure to be on this little thumbnail here. You can select one or the other. That's the layer mask, that's your image. So if I click on this image, and then I'll zoom out, and I use my blur tool, I'll zoom in again. Sorry about that. Zoom in, and I can use this blur tool to slightly blur the edges of the image. And what this would do is it would soften the edge and make it look like it's a part of that image, so it doesn't look cut out. So that edge should be slightly softer than it is over here. And it's barely visible, but it's worth taking that step to do it before you export and save your image. So talking about exporting, what I would do is I would obviously save as a PSD, because then you can save your original file with all the layers. But when you're done, export as a JPEG, and I'll do that at the moment, JPEG. And here it'll bring up a dialog box. It'll say, do you want to make changes? I just keep it default. Let's just hit save. And then it saves it to my downloads. Here's my final image of the IM assignment. And if you ask me, that's pretty good. And for doing this for free, all online, wow, we couldn't ask for more. So this is what a student of mine did with a Venom poster last semester. thought it was quite well done, and I'm excited to see what everybody else will produce for me. And looking forward to making more of these videos. So thanks for watching. I hope this helps you out, and we'll see you guys soon.